How a single human dad's fix turned into a cosmic romance with the most powerful alien princess. Asterisk, the queen couldn't feel anything. No warmth, no shiver, no desire, not even the brush of silk robes on her skin. Queen Saralai of the Varelian. Dominion stood alone in her private chamber on the icy world of Kevron Prime, surrounded by technology that had failed her. Medical drones floated nearby, silent. Her royal physicians had run out of ideas. Advanced nanotech, genetic patches, hormone sequencers, nothing worked. A cybervirus had damaged her internal regulators, and now her body refused to respond to even the most basic biosignals, without touch, without emotion, without desire. She wasn't just broken, she was unfit to lead. Worse, she couldn't produce an heir. And in the Varelian Dominion, a queen without an heir was as good as dethroned. The court whispered behind silver doors. Nobles plotted. Some advised adoption. Others suggested cloning. But Saralene knew the truth. If she could not restore her biology, her throne would soon be taken by one of the cold-eyed advisors, who smiled too much and bowed too low. Then came the human. Colt Rayner. No one took it seriously at first. Desperate. Idea. Born from some half-drunk diplomat who insisted human biology had strange, almost magical adaptability. Colt wasn't even a proper scientist, not in the Varelian sense. He was an ex-farm boy from Earth with a background in exobiology and a reputation for surviving diseases most species would die from. The man had reportedly slept with creatures from 3 systems and walked away grinning. His medical scans were cleaner than a sterilized lab. He arrived wearing a leather jacket, boots too dusty for royalty, and a hat that looked like it belonged to a cowboy. When asked for credentials, he pointed to his belt buckle and said, "This baby's seen more biological anomalies than your whole damn database." The palace AI short-circuited, trying to verify that Queen Saralei expected nothing. Maybe a laugh, be a distraction. She watched him from her throne, stiff and expressionless, her skin pale and temperature neutral. He walked up, looked her over like she was a prize cow with a limp, and said, "You don't feel anything, huh? WELL, we'll see about that." Court gasped. She didn't. Colt wasn't gentle about it either. Scanned her with a device he'd built himself, cobbled together from spare parts and duct tape. He sniffed the air. Literally, you don't give off scent. "That's not good. You got glands locked tighter than a vault. We need to fix that." His voice was calm, almost amused. Saralei watched him, curious despite herself. Her species didn't normally express emotions, but something about his presence stirred a flicker of interest. No, that wasn't the word. Awareness, maybe. His heat signature alone was unlike anything in the palace. The very air around him shimmered with warmth, and her sensors picked up a faint shift in her neural field. When he asked permission to touch her arm, she allowed it. No one had touched her bare skin in over a year. He pressed his hand to her forearm, rough fingers against smooth Varelian flesh. Her eyes widened. Not much, but enough. There it was, a spark. A single neurotrigger fired. Her body registered. "Contact? I'll be damned," Colt whispered, eyes locking with hers. "You're thawing." It wasn't just physical. Over the next few days, her systems began to react. Her heart rate fluctuated for the first time in months. Hormone levels that had been flatlined began climbing slowly, cautiously. She started dreaming again. She even laughed once, quietly. When Colt tripped over a ceremonial robe and cursed in 3 languages, at night. When the palace was quiet and her advisors had retired, she called for him, said she needed further bioevaluation. He never said no, and each visit lasted longer than the last. One evening, she stepped into his quarters without warning. No guards, no pretense, just her, standing at his door, eyes uncertain. "I cannot sleep," she said. He looked up from where he was fixing some old diagnostic device, shirt half unbuttoned, skin glowing in the low light. "Do you want me to read?" "You a bedtime story?" he asked with a grin. "No, I want to feel." She didn't need to say more. He stood approached and held her hand. Not clinical, not professional, just warm. Human, her breath caught. His did too. Whatever barriers remained between them, cultural, political, biological, they crumbled the moment her body leaned into his. Guided not by duty or protocol, but something older, simpler. Hunger, connection, life. The Queen, once frozen and alone, had found the one species in the galaxy whose touch could reawaken what her empire's technology could not. And Colt. He just smiled and muttered, "Told you Earth boys were different." The Queen didn't leave his quarters until morning. Not that anyone dared question it, but the palace walls had ears, and those ears were twitching. Queen Sorali walked the long, curved halls of the Varelian palace barefoot, something no royal had done in 1,000 years. The silver robe trailed behind her like a comet's tail. The guards looked straight ahead. The servants kept their heads low. Only the biometric wall panels blinked nervously as her core. Temperature, previously stable at a crisp 17 degrees Celsius now, surged erratically between 36 and 39. She was warming up, literally, and that terrified the Dominion. Colt Rayner, meanwhile, stretched in his bed like a man who'd just made peace with every alien god at once. He scratched his chest, yawned, and glanced at the royal insignia left on his pillow, the little glowing crest that shimmered when touched. "Well," he muttered, "guess that means we're going steady now." He didn't realize that his DNA sample, taken during a routine scan earlier in the week, was currently lighting up every genetic database on Kevron Prime. The Varelian scientists had cross-referenced it against their ancient fertility charts, their biobonding simulations, and even a few forbidden texts from the Age of Flesh. What they found stunned them. Colt's physiology didn't just match the Queen's, they were hypercompatible. His immune markers adapted on contact. His endocrine system responded instantly to her dormant pheromones. His cell structure even emitted low-frequency warmth that reactivated her nerve lattice. To put it simply, Sarali's body was treating Colt like he was the missing piece of her biological puzzle. And it wasn't just chemical. There were changes in her behavior. She smiled at the kitchen droid when it served her breakfast. She added a dash of honey to her tea, something no Varelian had done in centuries. During a high council meeting, she interrupted a pompous noble by raising a brow and saying, "Remind me again why you're still talking." The court was stunned. Whispers turned into murmurs. Murmurs turned into formal concern. And by midday, a delegation of elders approached her chamber to demand an explanation. They found her in a sunroom, barefoot again, watching a holoscreen loop of earth cows grazing in a meadow. She was humming. One brave elder cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the human, he is affecting you." She didn't turn around. "Yes," she said, "he is. We believe it is unsafe, Layli." She turned then, slowly, like a glacier melting into a tidal wave. "What's unsafe is assuming I will lead like a frozen corpse. What's unsafe is expecting me to birth the next generation of our empire using cold steel and sterile tubes." Her voice was low and sharp. "The Dominion will not survive on theory and algorithms. It needs fire." The advisors bowed and scurried off, back in Colt's quarters. He was busy doing very human things, drinking something too strong, building something too messy, and talking to himself. He was trying to assemble a field incubator from scrap parts, in case the Queen's system needed external support. "Between hammer swings," he muttered, "she probably thinks I'm just muscle and manhood. Hope she likes brains too." The door slid open. Sarali entered. She wore no crown, no royal robe, just a deep violet tunic that hugged her curves in ways Colt immediately forgot how to speak around. "You're building again," she said. He shrugged. "Gotta keep my hands busy. That, or I start fantasizing." Stepped closer. "About what?" He turned, looking her in the eye. "About you. About what this is." He hesitated. "Did. Look, I didn't plan this. You're a queen. I'm a glorified rancher with a fancy degree and good hair. But if what we're doing is just temporary, say so. I'll still help. Just need to know." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, she placed a hand on his chest. "My body recognizes yours, like it's known you 1,000 years. My mind, however," she tilted her head, Still finds your sarcasm exhausting? He grinned. It's a coping mechanism. She leaned in. I'm not coping anymore. When she kissed him, it wasn't robotic or analytical. It was fire meeting ice, and the ice never stood a chance. That night, she brought him to the royal hibernation chamber, a place no one had entered in generations. It was where Varelian monarchs once went to sleep between wars, resting in thermal stasis. She laid on the glowing platform and gestured for him to join her. The temperature will rise, she said. Your touch activates the old heat systems. Raised an eyebrow. That's some kind of metaphor? Oh, she replied, but you'll enjoy it either way. The chamber pulsed with light as they lay together. Her body curled against his instinctively, almost greedily. The bioscanners outside went haywire. Internal sensors recorded surges in energy, hormone release, neuroconnectivity, and one unexpected flag: fertility status optimal. When Sorelli finally closed her eyes, her breathing deep and calm, Colt whispered into the quiet chamber, I'm just a guy with strong hands, warm blood, and one hell of a stubborn streak. But damn, if I didn't just reboot an alien queen with a cuddle, the Dominion would never be the same, and neither would she. Asterisk by the third sunrise after their first night in the hibernation chamber, the Queen's chambers were no longer cold. The palace temperature had shifted across all systems. Maintenance drones couldn't explain it. Environmental regulators insisted everything was normal. Yet warmth lingered everywhere the Queen went subtle. Golden warmth, like sunlight tucked into her skin. Sorelli didn't speak of what happened in the chamber, but she moved differently now. Her steps were slower, smoother. When she sat in council, she didn't freeze, she breathed. She listened, and when her advisors bickered over protocols, she laughed softly. Like it tickled a place inside her that hadn't existed before. Some thought she'd lost control. Others whispered she had finally gained it. Colt didn't try to act like a courtier. He still walked around shirtless. Still called her ma'am in a tone that made the guards frown. Still fixed equipment that didn't need fixing, just to keep his hands moving while his thoughts spun circles in his head. He had been around a lot of aliens in his time. Dated a jelly-spined Omri dancer once. Spent a wild week with a Vraxian who communicated entirely through electrical pulses. But this was different. Sorelli wasn't just fascinating, she was transforming. And the strangest part was so was he. He started noticing things. How her eyes, once silver gray and blank, now caught light like a still lake. How her fingers curled around his when she was thinking, as if his presence helped her focus. How her body, which once rejected all physical contact, now pulled him closer at night with the kind of soft, urgent need that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with want. One night, as they lay together again beneath the soft humming glow of the ancient chamber, she whispered something that stopped his heart. You know, they want me to end this. He was silent a moment because of me. She nodded against his chest. They believe I'm too emotional, too altered, that I'm no longer fit to lead. He swallowed hard. Are they wrong? She pulled back to look at him, her face glowing faintly. They are. I am more myself now than I have ever been. Then, softly, but I won't lose my throne for this. He sat up slightly. You don't have to. Look, I'm not here to mess up your empire. I'm just trying to keep up. Never asked to be royal consort or palace decoration. Hell. I'd be happy just setting up a ranch on your moon and fixing plasma fences for the rest of my life. She smiled, then really smiled, wide and unguarded. You think I'd let you go now? That was the moment he realized she wasn't just warming up to him. She had chosen him. But the palace didn't care about hearts or chemistry or shared laughter in the dark. By the next day, the High Bio Council filed a formal challenge. They demanded a purity trial, Varelian tradition from centuries ago. An ancient test to determine whether a royal's chosen mate was biologically and politically worthy. Normally it was ceremonial, a formality, but for a human, it was a trap. Sorelli stormed into Colt's workshop that afternoon, furious. They want to test you, scan your body, your brain, put you through stress trials to see how your genetics hold up. They think you're unstable. Colt tossed down his wrench. They ever test your last suitor like that? No, he was Varelian, boring. sterile. Well, Colt said, stepping closer, guess they're not used to something. With this much horsepower? She gave him a long look. This isn't a joke, Colt. I know, he said, more serious now. But I'm not going anywhere. If you want me to pass their little test, I'll pass it. With a smile, in my underwear if I have to. Blinked. That might actually help. The test was scheduled for the next rotation. Word spread quickly. Nobles whispered. Servants peeked around corners. Everyone wanted to see the Queen's new consort, the human Wade, scanned and judged. He stood before a hall of scientists and elders, wearing nothing but a thin examination robe and a grin that said he didn't give a damn. One of the elders asked, "State your purpose, human." Colt scratched his jaw to make her laugh. Keep her warm. And apparently to pass your weird space test so she can keep ruling without freezing her royal ass off. Gasps. Sorelli smirked from her high seat. The tests were grueling endurance, stress response, reproductive capacity, neurological compatibility. Colt passed every one, with flying colors, especially the last. When they scanned his reproductive potential, the lead biotechnician's hand trembled. His output is staggering, she whispered. Another read the hormone feedback. He has adaptive pheromone cycling, responsive seed memory. His body adjusts to hers in real time. Elders murmured. Some looked scandalized. One looked impressed. Colt just stretched and said, "So I passed?" No one answered. Sorelli rose from her seat, walked slowly across the floor and took his hand in hers before the entire council. "This man," she said, her voice steady and commanding, "is not just compatible, he is necessary." She paused, then added with a wicked smile, "And you should see him without the robe." The palace was never the same again, and neither was the Queen. The robes came off that night, not just his. The Queen had never undressed for anyone before, not fully, not willingly, and certainly not with a smile on her lips and mischief in her eyes. But that night, as they stood alone on the upper terrace of the palace, beneath a sky shimmering with 3 moons and a dozen soft-colored auroras, Sorelli untied the last clasp of her formal uniform and let it fall. Colt, shirt already long gone, raised a brow. "So, this part of the test got delayed, huh?" She stepped closer, her bare skin glowing faintly from the internal fire he'd helped reignite. "This part," she murmured, "isn't for the court." There was something ceremonial in the way she touched him that night, like she was claiming him not just as a mate, but as a symbol of rebellion, of change, of everything her world had told her not to feel. Colt was patient, even playful. But deep down he knew what this meant. She wasn't just taking a lover, she was choosing a future, and that future began with the way. Her hands traced his shoulders, memorizing muscle and warmth, as if to burn them into her memory. The way her breath caught not from fear, but need when he pressed his forehead to hers and whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." What happened on that moonlit terrace would later become something of a myth. Rumors spread through the palace halls of a long, low hum that vibrated the marble pillars, of light spilling from the Queen's chambers in pulses, soft and steady, like a heartbeat synced to another. Some said the Queen's voice echoed through the courtyard that night, not in command, but in a low, breathless cry. And for once, she wasn't giving orders. By morning, her skin was flushed, her eyes brighter, her gait looser, hips moving like she finally understood what her body was built for. She didn't bother hiding it. She walked past stunned nobles wearing nothing but a deep blue robe and a knowing smile. Meanwhile, Colt was already elbow-deep in a broken atmospheric filter on the outer decks, grease on his hands, hair messy, humming some old Earth tune like. Nothing had changed, except everything had. A week later, Sorella collapsed mid-council session, not from illness, but from a hormonal surge. The palace medical AI panicked and, stuttering, ran diagnostics 6 times before it believed the data. The Queen was entering bonded, heat, a biological phase Varelians hadn't seen in centuries. It was believed extinct, but now it was back. and worse or better, depending on who you asked. Colt had triggered it. Her glands were overproducing oxytocin. Neural links were forming faster than her consciousness could process them. She was addicted to him. Not chemically, but biologically. Her body now sought him out on its own. One evening, she tried attending a royal banquet without him. It threw the first toast, the second course, and 3 political compliments before she suddenly went pale and fainted. Into a bowl of sweet root wine, Colt was halfway across the palace fixing a busted elevator when he felt it a tight, inexplicable tug in his gut, like someone had tied his insides to a tractor beam. He dropped his tools and sprinted. When he reached her, she was curled in a private lounge, breathing fast. Guards panicked, ministers useless. The royal physician, babbling about neural craving, instability. He knelt beside her, took her hand and just whispered, "I'm here." Her pulse stabilized instantly. Her skin warmed. Her breathing slowed. She looked up at him like he was the first thing she ever truly saw. "I think I'm broken," she whispered. "No," Colt said gently. "You're just... wired for me now. Maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's evolution." Catching up that night, she didn't let him leave her side. It's not for food, not for air. She curled against him in her bed like gravity had changed and his body was the new north. They didn't make love that night. Not because they didn't want to, but because they didn't need to. It had become something more, something still. Deep and alive in the quiet, he held her through the night, rubbing lazy circles on her back, humming old earth lullabies. She slept like a child, like a queen who had finally earned rest. By dawn, palace medics confirmed what no one expected. The queen's reproductive lattice was no longer dormant. Her body was not only fertile, it was flourishing. New cell clusters had formed. Dual-coded hormonal patterns, half human, half Varelian, were showing stable integration. For the first time in Varelian history, cross-species heir was biologically viable. The court didn't know whether to panic or celebrate. Colt just sipped his coffee and said, "Guess we skipped a few steps, huh?" Sarah Lee laughed until she cried. Then she stood before the council, fire in her blood, and made a declaration no queen had ever dared. "I will not ask for your permission. I will not apologize for what my body has chosen. And I will not step down. If my line is to continue, it will be with this man. And if that offends you'll build a bridge, then jump off it." Colt winced. "Kinda harsh, babe," she smirked. "Got pregnant. You want diplomacy? Talk to the cooks." No one challenged her after that. They didn't have to. Because deep down, even the most skeptical elders had seen the truth. The queen, who once couldn't feel, couldn't touch, couldn't desire, had come back to life because of a human. And now that life was growing inside her, and it had his eyes, the queen was pregnant, and the galaxy wasn't ready for it. Varelian newsnets exploded with speculation. Some called it an evolutionary miracle, others a genetic scandal. The words cross-species contamination appeared in more than one High Council complaint. Sarah Lee ignored all of them. She had a baby growing inside her, a child created not by lab procedure or political arrangement, but by real, biological intimacy. She could feel it already. The tiny pulses, the heat, the rhythm. Her own body had once been cold steel, a monument to control. Now it was a fire chamber live, glowing, humanized, and next to her was the man who had made it possible. Colt Rayner, the Earth-born ex-farm boy turned accidental royal consort. He was already talking to her belly. "Hey kid, just a heads up, your mom runs an empire, and your dad fixes things with duct tape and dumb luck. So you're gonna be real weird, but we love you already, so you'll be fine." Sorelli chuckled, her hand running through his hair. "They'll be more than fine. They'll be impossible." She kissed him softly, then added, "Just like you." But peace never lasted long in a palace. 3 nights later, a message came through secure diplomatic channels. A fleet was mobilizing. Not Varelian. Not human. Something older. Hidden. Watching the Threx Dominion, a rival empire that had stayed neutral for centuries, had detected the Queen's pregnancy. Their ancient doctrine forbade hybrid births. They believed cross-species bloodlines were an abomination that would dilute the divine chain. Now they were preparing to strike. "We're being punished," Sara Lee said, staring at the stars from the war room, "for doing something natural." Colt crossed his arms. "A baby's not a weapon." "To you?" Her voice was colder now, distant. "To them, it's proof we're evolving, that we don't need purity or borders or old codes anymore, and they're terrified." He leaned forward. "Then let him be terrified. We're not running." Deep down, he knew this wasn't just about old beliefs. This was about power. If their child was born healthy, it would change everything. A living symbol of unity, of interspecies survival. That scared entire governments more than any fleet, so they tried to kill it before it was born. The first attack came 2 days later. A covert infiltration team, masked in Threxian stealth armor, breached the palace perimeter under false trade credentials. Sara Lee was in her private chambers when her internal AI screamed a warning. "Breach detected. Multiple hostiles. Weapons hot." Colt was in the garden shirtless. Again, when the shots started, he didn't flinch. By the time he reached her quarters, 2 guards were down, and Sara Lee had her pulse rifle in one hand and her other hand over her stomach. She was breathing hard, pressed against the wall. Colt tackled the first attacker through the glass, rolled, punched, took a blade to the shoulder, didn't stop, grabbed the attacker's weapon and used it to fire a blast straight into the second. One's chest, blood and sparks. Silence. Then, "Are you okay?" he said, his voice raw. Sara Lee nodded, sliding down the wall. They knew. They knew I was unguarded. Someone inside helped them. Colt pulled her into his arms, checked her belly. "Is the baby?" She smiled weakly, still kicking. He kissed her forehead. "Good. Because I was about to go full farm boy rampage if I lost either of you." But it didn't end there. That night, as medics patched him up in drones, hauled the bodies away, the Queen addressed the High Council with fire in her eyes. "I will not hide. I will not step down. I will not terminate this pregnancy." Silence. "Let it be known the child I carry is living proof of evolution. Progress. If anyone threatens them again, I won't just defend my throne. I will burn the stars themselves to protect my family." Colt, standing behind her with a blood-stained sleeve and a cocky grin, added, "And just so we're clear, I'm the one who fixes the damn burn marks." A few nobles chuckled. Most didn't, but all of them remembered that moment. The Queen wasn't cold anymore. She was blazing. In the following days, security doubled. And still, Colt refused to leave her side. He even moved his workshop into the royal wing, turning a ceremonial ballroom into a chaotic tangle of tools, wires, and stub. Coffee mugs, Sara Lee didn't mind. She liked falling asleep to the sound of him muttering at broken tech, or singing off-key Earth songs to her belly like it was already listening. One morning, she woke to find him asleep on the floor, one hand wrapped around her foot as if anchoring himself to her. Even in dreams, she whispered, "How did I survive before you?" He stirred and murmured, "With terrible taste in men, probably." She laughed so hard, she nearly went into labor. But laughter wasn't enough to stop the war that was coming, because the Threx Dominion had declared it publicly now. If the Queen bore her half-human child, it would be considered an act of genetic war. And they were sending a fleet, 30 warships. No negotiations. No stalling. They had one goal: prevent the birth. Sara Lee stood before the Defense Council. "This is no longer about one child," she said. "This is about our right to evolve, our right to love, to feel." She turned to Colt. "And I will not lose that, because an empire prefers sterile bloodlines and cold thrones." He stepped forward, "And let's make this baby a legend before they're even born." Outside, stars flared. Warships moved inside the palace. The Queen placed Colt's hand on her stomach and whispered, "If they want a war, they picked the wrong mom, and that child, that half-human, half-Aurelian spark of life." It kicked hard. Asterisk Kavran, prime braced for war. 30 Threxian warships breached the outer zone in formation so precise, the planetary defense AI stuttered, trying to predict their trajectory. Massive vessels shaped like obsidian blades cut across the night sky, their heat signatures growing with each passing hour. But inside the palace, Queen did not panic. She was glowing, literally. Her pregnancy had reached its mid-cycle, and her body radiated a steady pulse of energy that sent palace sensors into alarm. The hybrid fetus had begun to influence her physiology. Her skin was warmer, her heart beat faster, her hormones now spiked whenever Colt was near, which was always, he never left her side. Not when the lights dimmed, not when the storm alarms howled, not even when the Varelian Council offered him a personal escape pod for safety. Colt had stared at them and replied, "You'd think I'm gonna abandon the woman carrying my kid just so I can float around space sipping juice packs in a tin? Ken, nah, I'll stay right here. You might want to lock up your silverware. Though I've been stress-eating metal." Nice. That earned him a nervous chuckle. It's mostly nervous. He wasn't just a partner anymore, he was part of the strategy. Saralai had tasked him with upgrading the old thermal shielding systems around the palace. The Threxians' weapons relied on directed cold cryonic shock cannons that froze a target's neural systems before impact. Standard Varelian armor could resist them. For a few seconds, human nervous systems. Much longer, Colt figured that gave him exactly one advantage. "I'll be your heat shield," he said, crouched behind a burst conduit, elbow deep in wires. "If they're bringing cold, I'll bring the furnace." Sarili watched him from the balcony, arms crossed over her belly. "That's not romantic, Colt. That's suicidal." He wiped sweat from his brow. "You married me for my poor choices, remember? You're not my husband?" He stood, grinning. "Huh, not yet." For a Varelian, such a statement bordered on scandal. But Sarili didn't flinch. Instead, she walked across the room, took his face in both hands, and said softly, "You are everything to me." And for the first time since the fleet's arrival, Colt had no comeback. Just the look of a man realizing he was more than just the human in the room. He was the reason the Queen was ready to fight. Later that night, stars burned blood red. The Threxian fleet sent its final broadcast: surrender the hybrid seed, or burn with it. Sarili stood in the war room, wrapped in a flowing deep crimson robe that matched the fire in her eyes. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She simply leaned forward and replied, "Then light your torches, cowards. This Queen does not burn. She boils." Across the room, Colt muttered under his breath, "Damn, that's going to be hard to top." So he didn't try. Instead, he got to work, using Earthside agricultural shielding technologies to protect crops from solar bursts. He began repurposing it into something else. Biothermal dampeners. Strapped across the Queen's abdomen, the device would mask the fetus's unique signature. Hide it. Protect it. Saralai raised an eyebrow as he tightened the straps. "You built a baby blanket out of tractor insulation?" He shrugged. "You sleep with a plasma rifle?" "We all have our comforts." She smiled and kissed him so fiercely. He forgot what planet he was on. But the time for laughter ended when the first Threxian pod landed. The palace shook. Alarms screamed. And Sarali, despite the protests of every advisor and medic, marched straight to the front lines with Colt beside her, and her unborn child pulsing warm beneath the shield across her belly. In the chaos of the assault, Colt fought like a man who had everything to lose. He wasn't trained for war, but instinct and stubbornness did the work. He tossed plasma flares, redirected heat vents to melt enemy armor, and at one point, disabled a Threxian hover drone with a shovel. "You brought a shovel to an alien gunfight?" Sarilla asked, panting behind cover. "I'm a farm boy, Your Majesty," he said, swinging it again. "We solve everything with tools and prayers." She laughed even through the smoke. Then came the final push. A Threxian commander breached the inner courtyard, flanked by guards, tall, skeletal, dripping with frost. We pointed at Cyrilla's belly. "Give it to us. That thing will end us all." Colt stepped between them. "Good. Maybe the galaxy needs an ending, or at least a restart." The commander raised his weapon, but Sarelli moved first. One shot. Direct hit, the cold blade of the Threxian. Empire fell with a scream, and silence returned to Kevrin Prime. The Threxians retreated within hours, not defeated by numbers, but by will. By a queen who refused to surrender her future, and a human who refused to leave her side. In the aftermath, they stood in the garden, ashes in the air. Colt's shirt was gone again. Sorelli leaned against him, her body sore, her stomach still glowing faintly. "You did it," she whispered. "No," he replied, brushing dust from her cheek. "We did." Then, without any court ceremony or crown, she took his hand, slid a small glowing band around his finger, and said, "You're not just the father. You're the flame that kept me alive. So let's burn together." Colt blinked. Was that your proposal? Yes. Damn, about time. And as the stars returned to peace above them, the queen who once couldn't feel, and the human who could only feel too much, stood together, not just as lovers, not just as survivors, but as the spark of something new. And inside her, that spark kicked once, more stronger than ever. Asterisk. The war was over, but the story of Queen Sorelli and Colt Rainer was just beginning. The Threxians had fled. Their ships broke formation and scattered across deep space, crippled not by firepower, but by something far more terrifying, a united bond between two incompatible species that worked anyway. Love, loyalty, and the wild biology of a stubborn Earthborn farm boy had done what no weapon ever could rewritten the future. In the weeks that followed, Prime transformed. The temperature across the capital shifted ever so slightly. Where once everything was sterile and clinical, now the air carried warmth. Life began blooming in places the gardens had long since given up on. Borellian science teams called it a bioresonance effect. Colt called it proof that cuddling fixes things. Serialized pregnancy advanced faster than anyone expected. The hybrid child inside her wasn't just growing, it was evolving. Already developing dual organ redundancy, accelerated neural branching, and a heartbeat that synced with both of theirs when they were near. The palace had to reinforce the walls of the royal birthing suite after one night of unusual pre-kick contractions caused half the power grid to surge. "I think she takes after her mother," Colt joked. "She?" Sorelli asked, raising a brow. Colt just smirked and pointed to her belly. "You don't feel it? It's girl energy. Fiery, bossy, going to rule the galaxy by age 10. Sorelli paused, then smiled softly. Then she needs a father who teaches her how to dig holes and break rules. He reached over and placed his hand gently on the swell of her belly. And a mother who shows her how to bend the stars without ever breaking herself. They kissed, slow, deep, like two pieces of the same story folding into each other. Months passed in a kind of dream. Sorelli stepped away from full-time governance, passing day-to-day command to her trusted science minister. The High Council objected, at first until she reminded them, gently but firmly, that she had single-handedly melted an assassin's brain with her mind during trimester 2. They stopped objecting. Colt, meanwhile, became a legend. He didn't mean to. He just kept fixing broken things, helping wherever he could. He taught local engineers how to reinforce thermal shields using low-tech Earth methods, introduced indoor plumbing to a backwater moon colony, and organized the galaxy's first official interspecies dad group. He still swore too much. He still left his boots in the hallway. He still called palace guards tin cans with attitude. But no one tried to stop him anymore. One evening, just before sunset, the queen went into labor. No panic. No alarms. Just a quiet moment, her water breaking while she stood barefoot in the royal garden. Leaning on Colt's shoulder, gazing at the twin moons. "I think it's time," she said. He nodded, calmly. "Let's go meet her." The labor was long, fierce, powerful. Sorelli didn't scream. She roared, and when the baby arrived, tiny, glowing, beautiful beyond logic, the palace fell into a hush that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Even the AI network fell silent, overwhelmed by data it couldn't quantify. She was ... radiant, small, perfect hands. Smooth lavender skin laced with golden warmth, eyes that blinked open far too early and locked instantly onto Colt's face. Sara Lee, exhausted and glowing, looked up at him and said, "She knows you, Colt." Tears streaming down his face, whispered, "Hi, little firecracker. Welcome to the mess." They named her Lyra Rayner Sorella, and she would go on to change everything. In the years that followed, the story of her birth became a symbol. Entire species that once refused to speak now traded openly. Research hubs opened on Kevron Prime, mixing human innovation with Varelian precision. A generation of young aliens grew up watching footage of Lyra's first steps taken barefoot. In the throne room, where she fell into her father's arms and promptly bit his nose, "She's got your teeth," Sara Lee said. "She's got your attitude," Colt replied, rubbing his nose. And that was their life. Not perfect. Not quiet. Right. Real. Colt taught Lyra how to throw tools and fix things. Sara Lee taught her how to lead with fire and grace. Together, they became the strange, wonderful. It's an unstoppable family that reminded the galaxy. Love is not a weakness. Biology is not a boundary. And sometimes, the fate of an empire hangs not on armies but on a single touch between two people who never should have met, but did anyway. In the twilight of a golden day, with the child curled between them, Sara Lee turned to Colt and asked, "Do you ever miss Earth?" He looked up at the stars, then at her, then at the daughter snoring softly on his chest. "Nah," he said. "I think I found the best parts of it right here." She smiled, and for a long, quiet moment, there was no war. No politics, just warmth. The queen who once couldn't feel, human who burned too bright, and the child who was. Born of both, the galaxy would never forget them, and neither would love. The end.